in the ceremonial chambers of Varansa's capital, where the air was thick and heavy with the scent of sandalwood and rare oriental essences, the king of Varansa, with unconcealed irritation, cast out a phrase that seemed to forever destroy the fate of a young princess. The Livian princess resembles a modest nun, more than a lady worthy of royal blood. King Stephen I uttered these words among his closest confidants, naively believing they would not leave the limits of that hall. But within thick stone walls, rumors spread faster than a forest fire, and by the very next morning, the entire court knew the young Amelia of Livia had been rejected. For her family, alas, this was not the first such blow. Several years earlier, another powerful monarch, the ruler of the Duchy of Armoria, had also refused marriage with her. For the daughter of King Arthur the Ineffective and the younger sister of King Damian III, this meant only one thing. The path to the throne of another great power was closed, and ahead loomed only the shadow of reclusion and oblivion. And yet, fate itself, as if stubborn, would not allow her to disappear forever into the silence of damp monastery cells. Amelia was born in the year 1214, during a rather turbulent time, when her father, King Arthur the Ineffective of Livia, was waging a difficult struggle with his unruly barons and with the papal authority. The family was fragmented. The king and queen had long since lost mutual understanding, and the little girl spent most of her time in the company of her kind nurse, Eleonora Visset. This woman became far more to Amelia than just a governess. She was her only solace during the long years when the princess and her mother lived in the ancient Stonebridge castle, far from her father's affection and royal care. When the girl was barely 2 years old, her father, King Arthur the Ineffective, passed away, leaving her and her mother at Stonebridge, where the cold marble walls held only the mournful echo of their loneliness. Eleonora continued to accompany her charge, even to the capital of Livia. For the young princess, this was her only salvation. A person remained by her side who loved her not for titles or royal lineage, but for her own pure, bright essence. Her 19-year-old brother, King Damian III, ascended the Livian throne, and Livia, torn apart by internecine strife, awaited a strong royal dynasty. In the year 1220, when Amelia was only 6 years old, she was almost married to Prince Eric I, the King of Nord. This union promised a fragile peace with the north, and Damian III, her brother, was fully prepared to sacrifice his younger sister for the sake of the crown. If Carolina does not return with a firm resolve, he told his council, Amelia will become his bride in her stead. But Carolina, the elder sister already promised to the King of Nord, returned, and Amelia, upon learning of this, fell to her knees in the chapel with immense relief. "Thank you, God," she prayed. "I was utterly unprepared." Her fragile soul, like a tender flower beneath the snow, feared a world where genuine love was replaced by cynical politics. From her earliest years, Amelia felt alien to the splendor of dazzling court life. She was burdened by the constant noise of feasts, disliked the pretentious, false smiles, and ambiguous conversations that literally drowned out every step of the royal court. Most often, she could be seen in the small chapel. She would sit for long periods in prayer, and her face held more humble contemplation than youthful vivacity and cheerfulness. By the year 1234, Amelia, at 20 years old, had become a barely noticeable shadow at the court of Damian III. Her days passed in constant prayer and reading. Her slender fingers turned the pages of an ancient psalter, and her heart sought peace and solitude. Her light hair, styled beneath a simple circlet, and her modest dresses made her remarkably similar to a nun. Court ladies whispered, "She is too quiet for a princess. She is like a nun." This reputation became so firmly attached to her that even foreign ambassadors arriving in Livia regarded Amelia warily, as a girl whose thoughts were too far removed from worldly passions and vanity. But Amelia herself saw no harm in this. If she had been asked what life she desired, she would have answered without hesitation: silence, prayer, and complete seclusion. She did not strive for marriage at all, nor did she dream of heavy diadems and luxurious feathers. However, alas, the princess could not dispose of her own destiny. She was the king's sister, and thus her hand was a guarantee of alliances, treaties, and peace. "Livia needs you," he would say. His eyes shone with warmth and care. Amelia, looking at her brother, would only smile faintly. She silently agreed, but deep within her soul, she knew. Her true happiness was hidden in tranquility. Damien III, who took the throne after his father's early death, saw primarily political gain in his sister's marriage. For many years, he sought a worthy groom for Amelia among the strongest rulers of Europe. And each time, the answer was the same: a refusal. King Stephen I and Duke Walter I rejected her, citing politics. "She is too devout," Stephen said. His words were sharp, like a blade. For some, this would have been a terrible disgrace. For others, the deepest despair. But for Amelia, every broken engagement was merely a great relief. She never concealed her joy from her kind nurse Eleonora when another alliance unexpectedly collapsed. "It means God is merciful to me," she would say. "He grants me a little more freedom." Eleonora would only shake her head gently and tenderly embrace her ward. But everything changed in the year 1234. Emperor Justinian II, widowed after the sudden death of his second wife, Princess Veronica of Carpathia, turned to the Pope with a very important question: whom should he choose as his consort? And the Pope's answer was completely unexpected. He named Amelia of Livia. The union promised long-awaited peace with Livia and the strengthening of the Aquitanian Empire's influence in Europe. Damien, delighted, summoned his sister to Altamir Palace. The news of the match was a genuine shock to the girl. She begged her brother to renounce this alliance. "Brother, allow me to stay by your side. How can I be happy away from Livia?" But Damien III gently, yet firmly, replied, "My sister, our fate does not belong to us. This alliance will strengthen Livia. You will bring great honor to our house, and perhaps God will reward you with true peace in your soul. You will become empress," he said. His voice trembled with unconcealed joy. She stood frozen in silence. It was absolutely impossible to argue with the brother whom she loved with all her heart. In the spring of the year 1235, Amelia left her homeland. Ahead awaited a long journey to her betrothed, dangerous and exhausting. French mercenaries attempted to kidnap her, as if mocking the king of Verranza's long-ago refusal. But the guard, provided by the emperor himself, managed to defend the future bride. The journey to the Aquitanian Empire proved to be an ordeal for Amelia, not only physical, but deeply emotional. She left her homeland with a heavy heart. Livia remained behind her. Ahead stretched complete uncertainty. When the ship, laden with her rich dowry, pulled away from the Libyan shore. The girl could barely hold back tears. Her nurse, Eleonora, stood beside her on the deck, holding her hand tightly, like a mother holding her child in the final hour of farewell. "Do not grieve, my child. God is always near," Eleonora whispered. "Even among foreign, cold walls, you will surely find solace." Amelia did not reply. Her lips trembled, but she stubbornly gazed into the distance, where her native land slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. Rumors of her journey outran the cortege itself. Throughout Europe, they whispered, "The Livian princess is going to become empress." But along with the excitement, dark, troubling warnings were also spreading. Emperor Justinian II, nicknamed the Wonder of the World, was not only a wise and just ruler, but also a man who was harsh, sometimes cruel, and self-willed. Scholars, poets, and philosophers loved him, but his wives and numerous concubines feared him. In May of the year 1235, Amelia arrived in Alania, an ancient city on the bank of the river Alda, where the emperor was already awaiting her. That day, everything shone as if by magic. The streets were adorned with flowers, and houses were wrapped with festive ribbons. Crowds of citizens filled the squares, eager to see the bride. Amelia of Livia, at 21 years old, stepped onto the soil of the Aquitanian Empire. Her light hair, set under a golden circlet, shimmered like moonlight in the night, and her dress of expensive, flowing silk looked like a river. But her eyes, clear as the morning sky, were filled with unbearable longing. When Amelia first met Justinian, her heart painfully constricted. Before her stood a tall man with an imperious, piercing gaze, and the posture of a sovereign accustomed only to unquestioning obedience. He, the son of Emperor Victor VI and Princess Helena of Sicily, ruled the empire, Sicily, and Cappadocia. There was very little softness in his appearance, only unyielding strength and steely confidence. The emperor, who was already over 40, received his young bride with favor, but without visible enthusiasm. He kissed her hand and spoke words about honor and state alliances. However, in his eyes, Amelia saw what frightened her most of all: cold, sober calculation. The wedding took place in the Cathedral of Alenia in July of the year 1235. It was one of the most brilliant celebrations of the entire century. The outfits, the gold, the light of hundreds of candles, the solemn sounds of the organ, all this dazzled the eye. Amelia wore a dress of the finest silk embroidered with pearls, and on her head shone the circlet that the wives of the Aquitanian kings had worn before her. When the priest placed the crown on her head, the people in the temple exclaimed in one voice, "Long live the Empress!" But Amelia herself felt only an unbearable weight at that moment, as if a huge burden, from which there would be no escape, had been placed on her shoulders, along with the golden crown. Immediately after the wedding, the emperor sent her Livian retinue back, leaving only Eleonora. "They are not needed here," he said. His voice was inexorable and brooked no argument. Amelia, concealing her sharp pain, merely nodded. "I am completely alone," she whispered in the night. Her bitter tears fell onto the silk sheets. The first months of the marriage became a genuine, harsh trial for her. The emperor, accustomed to splendor, surrounded her with luxury: palaces in Stolzenfels and Aspen, dresses of Sicilian silk, ancient books that smelled of parchment, but with complete inattention. His visits were rare, and his passion, alas, quickly faded. Justinian was interested not so much in his young wife as in the affairs of state, complex wars, and his beloved scholars, whom he gathered at his court in Aspen. Amelia, however, remained on the sidelines. Like a dim shadow next to a bright sun, she tried to win her husband's attention, but he treated her like an expensive jewel that could be put on public display, but which was not at all necessary to cherish. Justinian, whose passion for knowledge and women was a legend, did not demand much from her. He respected her piety, but his heart, like an impregnable castle, was closed. The first wedding nights were especially difficult for her. There was no tenderness or understanding in Justinian's character. He did not know how to handle a young, timid wife, and his involuntary roughness often brought her to tears. One day, unable to bear it, Amelia wrote a long letter to her brother Damien in Livia. In it, she asked for prayers and solace, not complaining directly, but transparently hinting at her quiet sorrow. Damien received the letter and sighed heavily. He certainly understood that his sister was unhappy, but it was already impossible to change her fate. The alliance with the emperor was too important for Livia. However, not everything was entirely cheerless. Justinian, though a cold husband, cared for her high position as empress. He commissioned new chambers for her in Sicily, gifted rare jewels, and organized lavish feasts. But Amelia's heart found no joy in this. She dreamed not of gold and honors, but of the simplest things. A kind word, a sincere smile, the certainty that there was someone next to her who would share her heavy loneliness. Her only solace became her deep, unwavering faith. She spent long hours in prayer, imploring God for patience. In Aspen, she was more often seen in the chapel than in the noisy palace halls. Her quiet, humble life seemed strange against the backdrop of the emperor's tempestuous temperament, but it was precisely this that preserved her spiritual strength. She is like an angel, imprisoned among cold stone, one of the court clerics once remarked. Thus passed the first years of the marriage. Amelia withdrew further into herself, and Justinian into matters of state. Their union remained a symbol of immense political power, but for the woman herself, it was only a source of pain and quiet sorrow. But in the year 1236, everything unexpectedly changed. When Amelia learned she was carrying a child, her soul was filled with a new, unknown light. For the first time in a long while, she felt that there was something more in her life than her husband's cold gaze and loneliness in a foreign country. She prayed at night, pressing her hands to her belly, and whispered, "Lord, let this child be my greatest joy and my only consolation." This also meant a lot for Justinian. His dynasty was strengthening. In February of the year 1237, the empress gave birth to her firstborn, a girl named Christina, and a year later, a long-awaited boy came into the world, named Arthur, in honor of her late father, the king of Livia. This event was a true triumph. Sicily and the entire empire rejoiced. Justinian, though he did not show tenderness to his wife, did not hide his pride in the air. "Now my dynasty is stronger than ever," he told his confidants, and his voice resonated with steely certainty. For Amelia, this child was not only an heir, but also a small, warm ray of light. She held her son in her arms, looked into his calm eyes, and thought, "Here is my support. For his sake, I will endure everything." But the joy of motherhood was overshadowed. Justinian treated the children as instruments of politics. He thought of future marriages, alliances, and inheritance, not about being a father. This girl will make a beautiful bride for the Varansan prince, he would coldly dismiss, barely glancing at Christina. And the son will inherit my throne, he said of Arthur. His words sounded like a verdict, without a hint of paternal love and care. Amelia became increasingly estranged. Her world was limited to her children, prayers, and quiet walks in the gardens of Aspen. Court ladies often whispered, "The Empress is too silent. She seems to live in her own separate world. But perhaps that is for the best. This is no place for the weak," others would reply. Rumors that Justinian had many mistresses reached Amelia even during her pregnancy. But in Aspen, it could no longer be hidden. The emperor openly kept concubines at court, completely disregarding his wife's feelings. But despite the humiliation, she tried to maintain her royal dignity. "I am the empress. I am the mother of his children, and that is my strength," she told herself. But Amelia's health grew weaker and weaker with each passing year. Frequent childbirth, longing, and constant tension drained all her strength. Her face paled, and her gaze dimmed. Even the joy of motherhood could no longer hide her fatigue. In the year 1240, she was only 24 years old, but courtiers noticed that she looked much older. "She is like a candle burning too quickly," one of the court physicians said. Justinian, meanwhile, continued to wage his wars and diplomatic games. He barely noticed that his young wife was fading before his eyes. To him, she was a symbol of the alliance with Livia, the mother of his children, but not a woman to be loved. The only person who truly cared for Amelia remained her kind nurse Eleonora. She often sat beside her, adjusting the pillows, stroking her hand and whispering, "Patience, my child. God sees your suffering, and the children are your most precious gift, and your hope." Amelia would only smile through her tears. Only one dream lived in her heart: to raise her children happily, so that their fate would not be as heavy as her own. The autumn of the year 1241 in Aspen was harsh. Damp winds from the mountains permeated the palace, and even the marble walls seemed to grow cold with sorrow. In the Empress's chambers, there reigned a dead silence. Candles burned day and night, and doctors and monks came more and more often. She lay on the bed. Her light hair, once shining, was damp with fever, and her eyes, clear as the morning sky, were dimming. The birth of her third child, an infant whose name history has not preserved, finally undermined her weak strength. Amelia could no longer get out of bed. Her body was weakened to the limit. Every breath was taken with incredible difficulty. In those rare moments when the pain subsided, she asked for the children to be brought to her. Nurse Eleonora wept softly, watching this sad scene. She understood that her mistress's days were numbered. Justinian, preoccupied with wars and negotiations, came only occasionally. His appearance was accompanied by retinue and noise, but next to Amelia, he remained cold and silent. He entered her chambers for the last time in October. "You must be strong. We have children, and they need a mother," he said, looking at her with the same imperious severity. Amelia answered him with a weak smile, "And the emperor only needs an ally." These words struck Justinian. He looked at his wife in silence, but found nothing to reply. That day, he left the chambers faster than usual. By December, the illness had finally overcome her. Servants and monks prayed by the bedside, and Amelia, barely breathing, whispered, "Receive me, Lord." and protect my children. In December of the year 1241, the Empress passed away. She was only 27 years old. The news of her death swept through Sicily and Livia. To the Livians, she remained the sister of King Damian III. To the Sicilians, a young empress who was pitied and respected for her humility and meekness. Justinian ordered her to be buried with royal honors in the Cathedral of Aspen, next to the tombs of his ancestors. Amelia, who became empress in the year 1235, lived in the empire for 6 years, but her life was like a tender song, cut short at midnight. At the funeral, crowds of people gathered at the cathedral. Women wept, and men bowed their heads. Even those who had never seen her up close felt that not just an empress had passed away, but a pure soul who suffered silently and maintained her nobility until the very end. Thus ended the life of the woman who was destined to become a symbol of sacrifice for the sake of the royal dynasty. She entered history not as a warrior or an imperious ruler, but as one whose meekness and pain revealed another side of the royal crown, a side where there is no splendor, but only self-sacrifice.